Yeah. Mm. Welcome back, everyone, to the Wolf King Brewing channel. This is it, man. This is the video you have all been waiting for. The showcasing and tasting of my 10-day European Pilsner. Let's pour it up. I've got a clean glass right here. The keg's down here. I don't want you to see it because a man's keg is sacred. You know how it be. Let's go ahead and pour a glass, shall we? So right off the rip, it's not the clearest, it's not the prettiest just yet. The color's very nice, it's very pale, very light in color, but it's definitely not, the most clear, bright looking beer you've ever seen. Real quick on that, this is like the second pint that I've pulled from this keg after fining with gelatin. So I've got like most of the yeast suspended in this glass, but overall, clarity was not really the issue here. I mean, part of the lagering process is giving the beer time to clear naturally and for everything to drop out of it. But that being said, again, after pouring a few pints, this beer is going to be pouring a nice homebrew clear is what we would call it. It's not going to be crystal clear like the commercial stuff, but it's going to be clear enough, certainly. Now, before I go too much further, let's talk a little bit about what happened after the brew day, which you guys saw back in episode 1. Fermentation kicked off incredibly quickly, and it felt like I was at high Kreuzen in probably 12 hours. And this was very similar to many of the ale fermentations that I've seen, but I've never done a lager this warm. So I've never seen an aggressive fermentation like this from a lager yeast, but I mean, it was really moving. It was moving quick. And within 2 days, within 48 hours, I had no noticeable airlock activity, and I checked the gravity of the wort and it was down to my expected final gravity, which was 1009. Now with my original gravity of 1048, my final gravity of 1009, I ended up at about 5.1% alcohol by volume, which is really nice, really pleasant. I could knock back a few of these and not be drunk, which was the idea. Now on the 8th day, I took the entire fermenter and I stuck it in the fridge behind me and cold crashed it down to 36 degrees. At the same time, I did add a ½ ounce of Perlé hops. This was kind of a spur of the moment type thing, but I would encourage you as homebrewers to do the same kind of thing if you were feeling inspired to do so. The beer did have, a slight sulfur aroma, and I thought, well, it only bothers me. It didn't bother anyone else that I let smell it, but let's try and mask that maybe with a little bit of a dry hop charge. And I do mean a little bit. I mean a ½ ounce of Perlé. It didn't make a whole lot of difference, but it did give a nice kind of lemongrass kind of character. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. Slightly floral and a little bit herbal, but it's got a tiny bit of lemon. It's not juicy or citrusy like, some other tropical style hops. It's nothing like that, but it really did balance the beer out very nicely. Now I did let those hops have 1 day of contact time in the cold wort before I moved over to the keg. Once it was transferred into the keg, I not only added my gelatin for fining purposes, but I also went ahead and did my burst carbonation at this point. Now I didn't have a lot of time left, so I didn't have many options here, but I carbonated this beer at 50 PSI for about 14 hours and it came out really nice. This method of burst carbonation is slightly risky, but it's pretty much what I use for every batch, especially in the 10-day Brews series when you want to get something carbonated quickly and you don't want to use the shake method, which is a little bit less reliable, I would say. But I can do more videos on carbonation methods later. If any of you guys have any questions about this stuff, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Let's go ahead and give it a rip, dude. I mean, I've tasted it every step of the way, so I could pretend to be surprised if you want. Here, watch. I got this. Yeah. A little bit of sulfur on the nose. Other than that, it's an extremely clean smelling beer. I still have some bubbles on my nose from when I stuck my nose in it. Just a tinge of sulfur. I mean, it's hardly noticeable unless you know what you're looking for. And to be honest, some people prefer that. I mean, I know a lot of German Pilsners have a slight sulfur character from the yeast that they use. I did use W3470, which is the Weinheim-Stefan strain, and it's known to produce a little bit of a sulfury smell. And honestly, it's not bad smelling. I mean, it's good. It's good. I'm I'm proud of this beer. I really am. It tastes good. It's crisp, it's light, and I will say, for the first few days after this beer was terminal, it had just butter on the nose. I mean, it was like sticking your face into a bucket full of movie theater popcorn. The diacetyl was nuts. Not surprising, because this beer, I mean, I fermented this at around 70 degrees and it finished out, it was terminal in 2 days. So not surprising that the yeast produced a little bit of diacetyl, and along with that, maybe some increased sulfur compounds made their way into the finished beer. It's got a slight like nutty or graininess on the finish. That can come from many different things. Get the fuck out of here, man. I'm trying to make myself YouTube famous, bro. There's a slight nutty, kind of grainy, almost like a raw grain kind of finish. I've experienced this in beers before, and especially beers that I turn around in a short period of time. It is my understanding that that kind of flavor is a green flavor. In other words, it's the beer showing some flavors of being young. Again, I mean, man, it's hardly noticeable, and I gotta tell you, it's less noticeable than it was yesterday. It was more noticeable the day before that. So it's definitely already clearing up. I did push this till the very last minute. This was not like the stouts that I did or the hazy IPA that were both done with plenty of time to spare in 6 or 8 days. This thing, I mean, I pushed it to the very, very last minute. And you might be thinking, well, hey, you posted that video, the first video, more than 10 days ago. So yeah, you pushed it till the last minute, maybe a little bit past the last minute if you ask me. I promise this beer was done in 10 days. It was at like the 11th hour, or should I say the 10th hour, because like I finished this beer the night of the 10th day. But the following morning, when I came downstairs and I intended to make the video because I had a little bit of time and I knew I was gonna be busy for the next few days, I was met with a tragedy that shook the very fabric of nature. I don't know how or why, but I came downstairs and the beer was carbonated, and I checked my CO2 regulator and it was totally empty. The tank had somehow emptied itself completely overnight. I developed a leak somewhere. Not only that, but I could not actually pull anything out of the keg because the keg was completely depressurized. So, and in fact, I believe this was a Sunday, so I think my local gas store was not even open. So I actually had to wait until the following day, which was, dude, that day was stressful for me. Sitting here thinking about that beer, I was pacing back and forth. I was like, man, that shit's ready. It's ready, but I can't make the video about it because I don't have gas to dispense it. It's just sitting in the keg, just ready to go. It is so much cleaner than I expected it to be. It really is. In my finished product, I had a noticeable sulfur nose, a volcanic rock kind of nose. And I didn't love it. My girlfriend Brooke tasted the beer and she said it's hardly noticeable. So I'm certain it was just me being picky because it's my beer. Me being me, I had to get rid of it. So I used something called CO2 scrubbing. And I can make another video on this if you guys want to kind of see it in depth, but it's incredibly simple. Basically, the beer's in the keg. Basically what I'm doing is I'm attaching my gas line to the outpost and I'm bubbling CO2 up from the bottom. And the CO2 bubbles through the solution. And then as it kind of bubbles its way up, I'm periodically purging the keg using the, I know this is kind of a weird motion that I'm doing, but I'm signifying pulling the relief valve. I'm pulling the relief valve to purge the keg of that CO2 as it's bubbling up through the solution. And what this does is it can drive off a lot of very volatile compounds. Sulfur compounds in particular are extremely volatile and can leave solution very easily. They don't want to be there, they want to go. So when you bubble CO2 up from the bottom, the CO2 pretty much strips those volatile compounds out. You can do this with DMS. Sometimes it works with diacetyl to an extent, but you can also do this if you have sulfur compounds. Now, that being said, I will issue a word of caution. In my experience, this is my first time doing that, but in my experience with this beer in particular, it also drove off some of the other aromas. For example, I think this beer has less perceived maltiness after doing that. Be forewarned, if you decide to use CO2 scrubbing to remove some volatile compounds, you can lose some other characters. Oh, and hop aroma is a big thing. If you had any hop aroma in the beer previously, kiss that shit goodbye, because CO2 scrubbing will blow your hop aromas right out of the beer. Those are also considered volatile compounds that need to be kind of kept in order to stay fresh. And really that's about it. I'm proud of this beer, and more than anything, I won't sit here and lie to you and tell you that this is exactly what I want this beer to taste like, but ultimately to me, this was a proof of concept that this can be done. You know, you can make a good, clean lager in 10 days if you do it right. And especially, you know, there's a lot of things that work together here to make this happen. Modern malts, modern yeasts, all these ingredients have been cultivated over the years and changed and modified to do what they do. And they do what they do so well that they can do it a lot faster than they have in history. So this video is not me trying to convince you to cut a couple weeks off of your lagering time. But I would encourage you to screw around with it. mess around with it, do things a little quicker and see what you get. Again, I did get a little bit too much sulfur for my taste, so I had to CO2 scrub my beer. So was this a total success? No, it's absolutely not. That being said, I have a crisp, clean, likable beer that I will drink and enjoy, and it only took me 10 days. I will levy some complaints against it. I think this is an important part of home brewing is telling yourself what you would like to do better when you brew this in the future. And it's pretty simple, actually. I want this to be maltier. I want this to have slightly more malt character. So I'm talking about swapping out that 1 pound of flaked corn that I used in this grist. Let's just take that out. Let's just ditch that and then maybe add a little bit more Vienna malt or just some more base malt. Go all malt so that I can get a little bit more malt character, because this could definitely be a little bit sweeter, have a little bit more complexity going on. But it's very light, it's very crisp. I would honestly say that this is probably closer in style to an international pale lager than it is to a European style Pilsner, but those lines are already kind of blurry as it is. So I will just call it what it is and what I intended it to be, which is a Euro Pils, and here we are. And it's good. I like it. You guys should try doing lagers in 10 days. I would encourage you to do so. In the future, I'll probably be fermenting closer to 66 degrees as opposed to 70. I would like to decrease the amount of sulfur compounds that make their way into the final product, but I will be doing more lagers in the 10-day brew series. But that's it. That's all I got. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. What if I just chugged this, but in like half a second, just like vacuum chugged it? Is that a thing? Vacuum chug?